try not to be boring. That's one thing I'm going to try to avoid. But it's been great to hear just a couple of things that we'll talk about in this presentation, both from Krafa and Pastor Eddie. So we are going to dig a little bit deeper into communication and how that works within teamwork. And we're also going to be talking about, I love that you learn so much more about you learn in your failures many more times over than you would in your successes. So one quote that I used to often say in my team was, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. So you're not failing, you're learning.
Yeah.
So I want to talk today about something that impacts every one of us, and that's teamwork. We are on a team one way or the next, whether we're at home, whether we're in a sporting event, whether we're on a sporting team, or we're on in church, wherever it may be. But more specifically, within teamwork, I want to talk about the power of team dynamics, how we navigate conflict, mediation, accountability, and collaboration. Now, I believe the areas that we will touch on are extremely relevant in our day-to-day, whether, again, it's in business, whether it's in sports, whether it's our personal lives. Now, despite the fact that we have and will continue to face conflict, we overcome these obstacles, and when we look at ourselves as a team of individuals, we realize that we don't achieve success alone. Now, I'd like to begin first with a little personal story about teamwork. So, prior to taking on the most demanding role I've ever had in my life, a stay-at-home father, / everything else that's going on, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my most recent corporate role. So I was working for a multinational, publicly traded, and at the time an 85,000 employee tech company, where I served as the regional sales leader for Europe, Middle East, Africa, UK, Ireland, and Russia prior to the sanctions. Now, this team that I was leading was a team of sales specialists. They were all remote. They were all embedded in their very different and respective cultures. They were selling complex enterprise networking and data center solutions. So we worked with numerous account managers. We worked with all kinds of channel partners throughout the region. We had a web of internal stakeholders, and of course, our customers. So we worked with every single one of those aspects, a very matrixed organization, to exceed the delivery of what the company expected of us. We were accountable for driving anywhere between $300 and $350 million in product and software revenue each year. It was no easy task. Now, at the start of our year, our sales dials went back to 0. So it didn't matter how well we did the year before. In fact, the better we did the year before, the more was expected of us the following year, right? But we had to start from scratch. And we had to find a way to succeed together. And we did. In fact, my team was recognized as the #1 team globally on several occasions, not by my efforts, but because of the collective efforts of each individual on the team. But let me be clear, it was not smooth sailing. We had plenty of conflict, right? There were times when not everyone was rowing in the same direction. There were times when people didn't understand, exactly what it was that they were supposed to be executing on. There were issues where we had conflicts with our partners, with our account managers. We had problems with customers, with stakeholders, and of course, stakeholders, right? Some of you may be familiar with corporate politics, even at times toxicity. It's all part of the game you have to navigate, right? Well, you can't build a great team without knowing how to navigate disagreement. And I want to talk about conflict resolution. It was touched on earlier by Pastor Eddie, and mediation. But before we go there, I think it is important to first highlight some common causes of team conflict. First, poor communication. misunderstanding or lack of clarity in instructions. We'll dive into this particular one in more detail because I think that this is at the heart of all of the other ones that follow. Another one, personality clashes, different working styles, conflicting personalities, different cultures, different ways of going to market, competing goals. Team members have different priorities and interests. Some people are wanting to compete with each other, right? So there's some conflict that will come with that, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Unequal workload. Sometimes team members may have a larger territory than another territory, just to reflect back on my personal story, but this can relate to anything that you're going through. But some members may feel they are doing more than others. Lack of recognition. It was touched on by Pastor Eddie. Lack of recognition, feeling undervalued can lead to frustration. Unclear roles, so overlapping responsibilities can cause confusion and friction. Now, I will say that conflict isn't always a bad thing. Some of the best ideas are born out of disagreements. But there's a difference between productive conflict, which fuels innovation, and destructive conflict, which tears teams apart. So how do we handle it when tensions rise? I have a basic framework for you. This may not come as any aha moment, but nonetheless, I want to talk a little bit about that. So first, it is important to have neutral ground. We talked a little bit about a mediator. Pastor Eddie mentioned that. This is generally in the form of a mediator, oftentimes the leader, or a trusted third party that ensures the discussion is fair. There's no bias towards one side. So we're going through this mediation, this time of conflict resolution, right? Clarify perspectives. So when we're in this conversation, when we're in this dialogue, we want to encourage open dialogue. We want each party to share their viewpoint without interruptions, ensuring that all sides feel heard. And we just heard from Raphael about communication, but specifically active listening. We've all heard that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for one reason, right? Or for a reason. There's also that 80-20 rule. Listen 80% of the time, 20% of the time you speak. When conflict arises, really listen to the other person's perspective before jumping in. And when you do speak, exude emotional intelligence, which we'll hear a bit more about later, through the utilization of empathy. So utilize empathy, that aspect of emotional intelligence. And so what I mean by that, just a couple of quick examples. Saying things like, it sounds like you may be frustrated by X, or I feel like you may be offended by what was said. Whatever may be the case, but if I approach a situation in an empathetic manner where I'm showing some attempt to understand where the other person or people are at, that's an empathetic approach that's going to usually calm tensions and show that you're working to understand the other individual or individual's perspective. Identify the root cause and find some common interests. Don't just focus on the symptoms of the problem. We have to dig deeper. We need to understand ultimately what is the true issue at hand, right? Often what we think is the issue is just the surface layer. The goal in any of this and all of this isn't to win, right? But it's to align on a shared objective that benefits the team. The more we uncover, the better we can understand how to overcome and move forward. And then, of course, lastly, we want to agree on actions and next steps. So not every disagreement needs a perfect resolution, but resolution in terms of defining clear next steps that everyone commits to, that everyone can commit to, is key. Sometimes we need to compromise. Both sides need to give a little to move forward. Other times we need consensus, where everyone fully agrees. Knowing when to use each approach is key. And now conflict resolution isn't just about logic, right? It's about managing emotions, both ours and others. It's also important to maintain a strong sense of self-awareness and self-control. Again, pieces of emotional intelligence. And ultimately, work to find and stay solution-focused. Now, while conflict resolution is crucial, preventing unnecessary conflict before it starts is even better. And I believe that most conflicts happen because of two things: communication breakdowns and our actual approach to situations, which Rafa touched on, the nonverbal verbal. So here's a mindset shift that I share with my teams and even with my kids. So Brenda may be smiling here in a little bit. All of us have probably heard that you should never assume anything, right? We've all heard that. Whatever you do, don't assume anything. In fact, there's a saying that goes with that, but I'm not going to repeat it. You probably know what it is. Well, I disagree that you should never assume. In fact, I believe there are two things that we should always assume. Here they are. Assume they know nothing, so inform. The second one is, assume you know nothing, so ask questions. Assume they know nothing, so inform. Now, in this example, replace they with a colleague. Assume your colleague knows nothing, so inform. Assume your manager knows nothing. Assume your child knows nothing. Your spouse, so inform. This applies to any relationship you have. It's crucial to proper communication. We cannot expect others to read our minds. It is extremely important to communicate clearly in all situations. Assume you know nothing, so ask questions. You don't have all of the answers, and you don't need to have all of the answers. Ask questions early and often in any situation. This helps you to seek understanding before making, well, assumptions. That is, all other assumptions you've been told never to make. Now, as for our approach to situations, let me illustrate what I mean by that with a hypothetical example. I promise you this is hypothetical. At least the first part's true, but the rest of it's hypothetical. And she's not here to defend herself. So, my wife, Lisa, her and I share, this is the true part, her and I share all finances, right? And so we have an agreement that we discuss any purchases that may occur, or any big purchases. Large purchases, we're going to have a conversation before we say, yes, let's go ahead and move forward with that purchase, right? Well, let's say that I'm reconciling our bank statement for the week or whatever it is, and I see there's this €500 purchase that I was not aware of, right? And so I'm a bit perplexed. There's a €500 purchase from the mall, right? I've got two options here. Option one, Lisa, what were you thinking spending €500 at the mall without me knowing? Why didn't we even talk about this? Option two, hey Lisa, I noticed there was a €500 purchase from the mall last week. I'm curious, since you and I hadn't discussed it, can you help me understand what was it for? Now, which approach do you think leads to an argument? Depends. Let's go back to the pen example. Now, I can say that in a condescending way, or it can come across in a condescending way, but if I were genuine about that second option, it wouldn't lead to an argument. But generally speaking, I'm trying to get the same information out of both approaches. Ultimately, I want to know why, right? But by choosing option two, we can agree to disagree. And depending on how I approach that, I could be, or I'm attempting to diffuse any accusation. Can you help me understand what the purchase was? And of course, you can do this in a way, doing it in person would be much better. I'm not approaching her with anger, and more than likely, I will receive an apologetic response if I do it the right way. That results in a fruitful discussion and a consensus going forward. But ultimately, the point that I'm trying to make in all of this is the way we communicate and the way that we approach a situation can be the difference between creating conflict and resolving it. Now let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about accountability within teams. So the term accountability is often misunderstood. Accountability is not just about holding people responsible when something goes wrong. It's about creating a culture of ownership where every team member understands their role in the bigger picture. So as a leader, and Pastor Eddie mentioned this as well, I believe in extreme ownership, taking full responsibility for our performance as a team. In doing that as a leader, you're exemplifying that same level of ownership expectation for each team member. Accountability is not just top-down, it's peer-to-peer. It's about mutual responsibility. Great teams hold each other accountable, not out of criticism, but out of a shared commitment to excellence. Now, accountability is not just about individual effort, it's about making sure the whole team is aligned, about the whole team, how the whole team is engaged and responsible for results. So how do we foster an environment that encourages healthy accountability? Set clear expectations. As a leader, everyone should know their role and what success looks like. Leaders must set clear, measurable goals and define what success looks like for the team. People can't be held accountable if they don't know what's expected of them. The second one I absolutely love. It actually comes from Army Leadership booklet. Provide purpose, direction, and motivation. People need to understand why they're doing something, not just what they're doing, or to be just told to do what it is that they need to execute on. You need the team to buy in to what they're doing, but that won't happen without transparency and service from their leader. And then the other thing is something that I practice quite frequently is regular feedback. I do what I call two-way feedback sessions. Not only do leaders provide feedback to their team and their team members, but team members are encouraged to give feedback to each other and to me as their leader. Because as I say frequently, and as Pastor Eddie mentioned, I say every day is a school day, and we all have something to learn. So I want to get that constructive feedback from my team so I can be a better leader, so I can be a better provider to what it is, a better servant leader to them going forward. Now, collaboration is the final piece I'll touch on, and it's one that I believe is really a byproduct of everything that I've discussed up until this point. So when we've built a foundation of trust, we've created systems to navigate conflict and instilled a culture of accountability, then and only then can true collaboration happen. Collaboration is not just working together. It's leveraging diverse strengths, fostering that constructive feedback, and building an environment where people feel safe enough to challenge ideas without fear. A collaborative team doesn't just work toward a goal, they own the goal together. And when that happens, that's when teams begin to go above and beyond, not just for their leader, not just for the company, but for each other. And that is the true power of teamwork. Now, as we wrap up today's session, I want to leave you with one key takeaway. Great teams don't happen by accident. They are built with intentionality, through effective communication, the ability to navigate conflict, building that culture of accountability, and a shared commitment to collaboration. So we've talked about how conflict, when managed correctly, can spark innovation rather than division. We've explored how clear communication and accountability create alignment and drive results. And we've seen that collaboration isn't just about working together. It's about owning success as a team. And at the end of the day, success isn't about individual talent alone. It's about how we come together. It's about how we support one another. It's about how we push each other to be better. The most successful teams don't just achieve great results. They build a culture where people thrive. So looking forward as we in our own leadership roles, as we step back into our teams, whether in the workplace, whether it's at home, anywhere in life, remember that teamwork is a choice. We have a choice to work as a team, right? We choose to communicate clearly. We choose to resolve conflict productively. We choose to hold ourselves and others accountable. And we choose collaboration over competition. Because when we do, then we're not just succeeding, we're then excelling as a team together. Thank you.
Questions?
I don't need to know. Kendal, do you think that there's a... Okay. Kendal, it sounds like there's a parallel with teamwork in corporate America and entrepreneurship, but also within a family unit, wouldn't you say? Like, because we need to collaborate, have conflict resolution, no matter how large or small our family is. So I thought there's a lot of parallels. That was, for me personally, because I don't really work in corporate America.
I 100% agree.
Okay.
You know, and in fact, when I'm the leader getting ready this morning upstairs, and I hear the girls bickering, and I'm like, I'm hearing the root cause, I don't have time to talk about the root cause right now because we got to get out the door, but I need to, earmark that for later, dinner tonight. You know, let's understand what the issue was. But yeah, absolutely. You know, and I say, you know, I may be the leader within the house, you know, but Lisa and I together are the leaders, you know, in our household. But yeah, absolutely parallels with regards to teamwork.
There's also dynamics change. My husband deploys a lot. He's gone right now. And leadership kind of switches roles too. Because he's the leader of the house when he's home. Well, kind of I am really, but
He's not here to defend himself.
He's not here, right? But it's how roles change, communication, and that's absolutely important. So I don't know if you want to speak to like how leaders might change roles.
Well, I think that's a really good point, right? So I'm in a similar situation. My wife is deployed. Not military, but she is gone. She's been gone since January 9th. And so, yeah, the roles have changed, you know, where I, in fact, am doing all of the things. And that's where I think it's important, you know, in a corporate environment, in a family environment, on a team environment, you know, you've got a captain of a team, right? But then you've got that team lead as well. You have someone that you can lean on in addition to. So that individual that either may be the leader, you know, be recognized as the leader on most occasions. You've collaborated together with that team lead or that, you know, that co-lead of yours, spouse in that case, to where when someone leaves, when the leader leaves, or when the spouse or, you know, the co-leader leaves, then actually there's the transition's quite smooth, right? Because hypothetically, you will have already had that transition through action over the course of the however long you've been together. And that's what we've, thankfully, I don't know, Brenda can speak, but hopefully things have been about as smooth as they can be lately for us.
Is it, Brenda?
So in a culture where people leave for any reason quickly, you know, or you hurt me, or I don't, you know, the husbands leave, wives leave, church people leave. How do you navigate that in a more like maybe in a corporate world people don't leave, you know, I need my job and you can't live like that. So what do you think is the key thing to navigate that as well? Like when people have to stay kind of thing or want to stay instead of just resolving by leaving or by shutting.
So is that a question around people leaving abruptly and how you handle that, or people who are staying and don't want to leave but need to
No,
go?
it says that you went through a conflict. You went through a conflict, but you're staying. So, but there's feelings, there's all kind. I don't work in the corporate world, so I'm interested in knowing, maybe other people are interested in knowing how you stay and continue with that.
Gotcha.
It should be in church, it should be in family as well, but it doesn't happen. A lot of people just shut the door and leave.
So I think it's really important to anticipate conflict, right? Know that that's going to happen as a team, and the way that you diffuse not diffuse them, but the way that you can. So what I do in the beginning is lay it out. In the beginning, if I'm inheriting a team or building a team, once we get that team together and we're meeting for the first time together, we have to acknowledge what we have. We have many different cultures on this team. We have many different opinions on this team. We have many differences in general on this team, right? So the expectation in this, so laying out the expectation, laying out that base level understanding of with this difference in culture, difference in approach, difference in thought, difference in opinions, difference in religions, let's make sure that we are super aware of that, be respectful of that, right? And see it as a wonderful opportunity to learn from each other going forward. So in that example, what you're doing is you're acknowledging many things that could become conflict before it happens. And when inevitably that conflict occurs, we can go back and say, remember what we talked about, right? And then so going forward, out of grace, and the principles that I utilize in leading my teams are biblical, right? And I'm unabashedly a Christian in any role that I'm in, is the grace and the forgiveness that we're going to make sure that we give each other, and ensuring that going forward that there is that grace and that forgiveness. And if there's not, then in the corporate space we have things and ways to go about moving those individuals if we have to. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Thank you, Kendal. A round of applause. Thank you so much.